Sawatika Booktube, thank you for joining me for a Thai novel discussion by KORBJITTI. The title is The Judgment. It's the story of a rural boy named Phak, whose father, the school janitor, passes away. He replaces the school janitor. They live in the monastery. Being indigent when they came to the village, the monastery took them in, as they do. And his future friend Kai, the undertaker, who's also sort of low status, asks this abbot why he takes him in. I mean, maybe these are bad people, we don't know them. And the abbot says, well, you know, we take in stray dogs. Of course, we're going to take in people. This sets up a whole dog imagery that follows Phak throughout his story. Now, this is a sort of Oedipal story in a Thai context. Let's compare it. We're going to need to put a couple Buddhist contexts in place for this to understand this well. Buddhists take refuge in the three jewels. That's the Sangha, Dharma, Buddha. And Phak starts out in the Sangha, which is the monkhood. And he is very good at learning the Pali Canon. So in the beginning of all this, he is beloved by the village. And he only leaves, disrobes, when his father passes away. And he indeed, in his worst drunkenness later, will always be shouting, I want to be ordained. He next takes refuge in the Dharma. So he takes over his father's job because his father has left a widow, a young widow. He married a lady much younger than himself. And the village immediately begins to revile Phak for living with his stepmom. What Phak fails to do, and maybe this is his fatal flaw, is take refuge in the Buddha, in that he's going to suffer a great deal, but in that suffering he does not endure it with the peace that Buddhism is meant to bring. There are 5 duties for non-monks, what we call householders. We call it the Panchasila. The 5 duties for householders are: do no harm, refrain from taking what is not given, so don't steal. Do not lie, so no misuse of speech, gossip, that sort of thing. No sexual immorality, and finally, no intoxicants, so alcohol, etc. A bad Buddhist in that way, since I'm not a vegetarian, I do harm. And I don't drink alcohol much, but I do love my coffee. All right, so Phak sat remembering. When he returned to reality, he felt bored sitting there looking at his former dwelling. Nothing could be recalled from the times gone by. They were just momentary illusions. Even though he had once known happiness there, it didn't help erase his present suffering. The latter couldn't be offset by the former, like a set of figures against another. Phak continued to sit there in thought for quite a while, then decided to take Mam Song Song to see the movie. Mam Song Song is the widow, and she unfortunately exposed herself at this village fair to the monks and is beaten, and thereafter the villagers sort of always ask him to keep her under, not lock and key, but at home during these sorts of village occasions. She is a sad story. She is developmentally dislayed, probably does need a caretaker. She loves to eat. She likes to collect little bits and pieces of things around the village. That's about it. And she loves to go to the theater, like in this scene where Phak is remembering his dad, because they used to sleep on the stage of the temple that used to be their home. And his attitude towards her is very much one of duty, of dharma. So dharma is, teachings, duty. So he takes care of her, food, a roof, this kind of thing. But it's sort of hard on her. Maybe some compassion fatigue. But it must be said, he, sometimes he's cleaning up and throws out her little knickknacks and this sort of thing. Okay, so this is the occasion of the common mom's father's funeral, is this fair. The common mom is sort of the head person of the village, and this funeral is going to be contrasted to Phak's funeral that he has for his deceased father later on, and that no one comes to. Very sad. And there's always this high status, low status thing. In fact, moaned and wailed about all that had built up in him, and he kept talking to the bones. So when he goes before the funeral, they open the coffin and take out his father's bones. And he makes his first friend with Kai, the undertaker, who, as I mentioned, sort of also low status in the village. Unfortunately, Kai is the one who introduces him to the alcohol to ease his suffering. Although Kai does have some words of wisdom for him as well. So he's got these bones out, imploring his dad over and over to help disentangle him from his web of suffering. This is also a big imagery, Indra's web. Later you're going to see his horrible insomnia, he can't sleep. He can handle things outside of the net, that's this mosquito net that he sleeps in. But inside the net, it's all churling in his head, and he cannot sleep. And the booze is what allows him to sleep. And it's why he becomes so rapidly becomes a bad alcoholic. This is an image in Buddhism called Indra's net, maybe pre-Buddhist as well, I think, back in Hinduism. So Indra has this net, and there's little mirrors at each of the junctions of the net. So it's reflecting and reflecting and reflecting reality upon itself, or suffering in the Buddhist viewpoint of samsara. The other beautiful image here is that he's going to take his father's relics. So they burn the body. His relics are the bones, right? The pieces of bones, and he takes them in the booze box. So this booze box he vomits on, but becomes a very big symbol later when everyone presents their relics on the like, on that stage. Everyone's relics are in beautiful containers. Fak is beyond caring at this point and just puts his dad's there in the booze box very blatantly. Strong image from the book. So he's moaning for a while when his throat jerked and he threw up all over the carton of relics on his lap. All right, let's talk about Uncle Kai the Undertaker, and his words of wisdom. This is what we all come to. Take a good look. Death leaves nothing behind. He's got no problems now. If anyone says anything, he doesn't hear it. If you hit him, he doesn't feel it. Your father's in peace now. It's only the living that have problems. The Undertaker spoke slowly, in compelling tones. So, we mentioned that the abbot said he would take people in, even dogs. This dog imagery sticks with Fak all through the book. And he is at one time dispatched, it says, to dispatch a rabid dog, which he does kill in a messy scene in front of all the school children who come running, mad dog, and this frothing dog. It's not clear what's going on with it. It's eating, and it's said that, dogs that eat, they aren't mad. But anyway, to be safe, the dog must be killed. It's felt the headmaster orders Fak to do it, as headmaster orders Fak to do everything. And Fak follows orders. So there's that whole following orders thing. There's also this problem of is it expedient to kill something if you're protecting something else? The Buddhist view is, of course, take no harm. So we're going to see all these 5 precepts violated at some point. We've got take no harm. You've got, sexual immorality maybe. You've got intoxication now. And in a minute, you're going to have lying, because the abbot asks Fak to refrain from drinking. But there's a certain coldness in it. It says that the abbot knew what was going on with Fak, but never called him for a talking to, as he had before. Instead, he took him as an example in his sermons of the evils of drink. Fak was perfect to illustrate the teaching of the Lord Buddha, which the abbot summed up as follows. Each person has his own karma. The Lord said that we can point the path of goodness only for those who have eyes to see. But as for the blind, even if we led them all along the way, they wouldn't see anything. This is very different from Mahayana Buddhism, in which sort of we all go up or we all go down together. So the abbot does finally ask him to promise to stop drinking. Fok does promise and goes back on his promise by nightfall, and he's just too far alcoholic at this point. He's got the DTs, and now so we've got him lying, right? Misuse of language. Here, though, in his defense is a description of his suffering before he breaks down and has that drink. I think it's really beautiful. He lay listlessly in the hut until evening, and as time went on, felt increasingly morose and fidgety. His problems and suffering kept piling up, like eggs stored in a new nest by an army of ants, which kept coming and going in unbroken, endless lines. If his torments could be seen, they'd fill the hut, spill out the door, and perhaps even run over the entire village. That's not a beautiful, evocative, poignant description of samsara, the state of suffering and life that we're in? I don't know what is. So he drinks again, and this is really the downward slide at this point. The children come spying on him. He, of course, is passed out in the house. He's late opening the door. It's cold or raining. He's not opened the school. The children come spying anyway. They see, Mom, as he calls her, the widow Samsam, running. In her panic, she drops her wrap. So, they've never seen a naked lady before. So there's more gossip about the drunkard Fak, and his lady makes his lady be naked, and Fak is so angry. It is said, this is kind of interesting. It said that the boys say that none of them knew stepmothers in the village. So maybe this was not a common thing in Thailand at that time. But anyway, that's important later on. Fak's so mad, he chases the kids. He can't catch them, of course. He hurls a coconut. Is he aiming to hit one or scare them? Don't know, but it hits a kid pretty badly. The kids, and so he gets fired. The kids' parents find and beat Fak in the woods. He's looking for the light. Is it a house or is it bandits? This is another beautiful Buddhist imagery. Along with the ripples in the pond is the burning forest. The ripples in the pond is from when he kills the dog, it's said. For a while, the killing of the dog that day showed that Fak was still of some use to society. At least he had protected the school children from danger. But it wasn't long before the story of his good deed, the killing of the dog, was lost in his own sense of overwhelming wrong, like a pebble thrown into a large lake, makes a few ripples for a while before the surface regains its calm. These are common Buddhist imageries. So yeah, the killing of the dog really leads to the downward spiral. That and no one showing to his dad's funeral. So now he's beaten, he's lost his teeth. But there's something important about Fak that I need you to know, and this is really going to be the beginning of a reappraisal of him. Of course, he wants revenge, right? We, as the reader, when we see him get beaten like this, we want revenge for him. That's a natural arising, a feeling that many of us have as humans in our body. Here's what it says. As time passed, however, his thirst for revenge began to recede, and little by little disappeared altogether. This was perhaps because violence wasn't in his nature. He was someone who liked peace. He actually had an aversion to fighting and wasn't cruel enough to kill. He quietly gave up any idea of revenge. He had thought of reporting the assault to the police, but was afraid the relatives of the two men would come after him and there'd be no end to the matter. When his desire for revenge finally left him, he told himself, forget it. Yes, so Fak mainly takes everybody's insults quietly, Once in a while tries to stand up for himself, but he has no status. The attitude of the abbot and the Sangha is a bit strange. The attitude towards the villagers is the biggest problem, I would argue, and the attitude of the headmaster we'll find out in a minute. So let's look at this, the villagers, and the way that they think and talk and act about Fak. There's renewed interest in Fak. His abnormal physical condition became increasingly obvious. He was yellow and bruised. He had swollen veins in his belly, and his receding breast, his paunch, and his capital of his breast had become to bagging breasts. And they came to the conclusion that with his bagging breasts and big belly, he was pregnant. It wouldn't be long before he gave birth. Others said it was the widow Samsung who had made him pregnant, and that his body had changed into that of a woman because he'd taken his father's wife as his own. Karma, that's what it is. Karma working right before our eyes. So some there are that, attracted to the spectacle that he is. Some avoid it. Some could care less. This is the attitude of the village. At this point, he's arrested. Why is he arrested? He defames the headmaster. Why does he defame the headmaster? Because he goes around saying that the headmaster stole all his money. Why does he say this? Because it's true. Fak has always stored his money with the headmaster. They eat the leftovers from the monks from the temple. They don't have big need of money. So he stores his money with the headmaster, but now he's going to be fired. He needs his money, right? The headmaster pretends he knows nothing about it. He's arrested. The policeman is also shown to be a person in authority who's not that great. Uses a slur at one point. He calls something about jinx, and calls Fak a cur. Yet another instance of this sort of dog imagery that we see over and over. He takes to drink like a tame dog. The calling of a tame dog. The Kamnam sort of, the headman sort of, sets the dog on him. And when he's beaten, he crawls like a dog, like a worm, like a dog, through the forest to home. And now he's going to crawl home again from the from the jail, where poor mom, as he calls her, widow Samsung, comes to find him. She's beside herself, worried, and even when he's dead, she won't let anyone near his body. So he thought that he had nothing left to lose, but he had his freedom. Soon he's going to achieve the ultimate freedom. There's a great book I want to do a talk about with y'all called We're All Doing Time, which is a Buddhist approach to prison and sees prison as a metaphor for life on this earth in these bodies. Really neat, by Bo Lojov. But let's get back to this one here. He's in jail. He earlier thought he had nothing more to lose, but he seemed to have forgotten that freedom was still in his possession. And now, even this had been taken away from him, taken away without his knowledge, through a trick which the law couldn't put right. All his past worry and anxieties rushed past him, making his head split with aching. His thoughts spun round, upsetting his peace of mind, refusing to give him a minute's spite. Time passed, he thought more and more. At times he thought his thoughts ordered him to stand. It ordered him to sit down, ordered him to walk around in his cell, ordered him to rattle the bars, ordered him to cry and laugh mockingly at himself like a madman. His mind at this point was like a boat full of holes. How many of us has felt our mind a boat full of holes before? And indeed, how many of us have been the puppet of our thoughts before? Thoughts make you do this and that and the other, especially when we feel desperate like that. So he's released. He doesn't even spend the night in jail because the headmaster forgives him. He makes it home. He struggles to light the lamp. This is a beautiful image, I think, because I remember learning from a stand-up comedian of all people who was a person of, they used to call special needs. And he says, you laugh at people with special needs. He said, but everybody is just temporarily abled. That is to say, we're all going to get old to the point where lighting a lamp, opening the pill bottle, putting on our shoes is beyond us. We're babes again. And he manages to get some booze. He knocks over the bottle. And as the wine spills off one end of the platform on which he sleeps, he's spilling out his guts from the other end of the platform and dies. Kai does come to see him. He didn't come to the jail, unfortunately, but he's still a good friend. And he comes a little too late in the morning. And the headmaster stole that money just a little too soon. Had he waited a little bit, he could have had all of Kai's money without putting that horrible karma on himself of having stolen it. And perhaps that was his excuse to himself when he did steal it, that after all, Fak was going to die soon anyway. Who knows? But there's one more thing I need to tell you about Fak. It's very important. I said that all 5 of these precepts would be broken, but in a way I lied a little bit. Here's his confession, one of the last things that he ever says, or thinks to himself, I should say. The drum and bell went on resounding, and the dogs continued to howl. He thought of the dog he had beaten to death that day and the retribution he had brought on himself. He had committed 3 bad deeds during his lifetime. He had killed the dog, he had lied to the abbot when he promised to stop drinking, and he drank. When he died, he would probably go to hell because of these wrongs. But wasn't what others had done to him much worse than what he had done? If so, he would no doubt meet many people he knew in hell, and he would be waiting for them. So yes, he did lie to the abbot, but arguably, I think the worst use of speech was on the part of the villagers, who ceaselessly hounded him for sleeping with his stepmother, which he never did, and many times protested his innocence. The only one who believed him was Kai. And for that supposed sin, his whole life was a nightmare. And I think this is what the importance of this story is, to think about these people that we see in dire circumstances. And, we judge them, or we want to distance ourselves from them. Maybe we're afraid there, but for the grace of God go I. Maybe we judge or don't judge them, or we do or don't seek out the circumstances that led to their fatal flaws or whatever brought them to the place that they're in. But there's a famous Buddhist story about a monk who became a hermit because he was famous for his virtue, this monk. And this poor girl in the village, she became pregnant outside the context of marriage and that sort of thing. And everybody was, who wanted to know who did it to her. And she just panicked. And she didn't want to answer, and finally she thought, this guy will be unimpeachable. She named the monk, the abbot. I think he was an abbot. And of course, the whole village turns on the abbot. The abbot says nothing, goes off into the mountains, doesn't want to exacerbate the girl's suffering, but in a way leads to the sinning of the whole village, because they all, immediately assume that he's guilty. Years later, she's on her deathbed, or I don't know what, maybe in childbirth, and she confesses, and she says that this guy had nothing to do with it. All the people come this way. Well, why didn't you tell us? And his Buddhist attitude was sort of like, well, what difference would it make? So there you go. The first of what I hope will be one of many looks at Thai literature. This lovely novel, full of beautiful imagery, symbolism, themes, interesting characters. The author is KORBJITTI. I'll write it down there for you in the description. It's called The Judgment. Another great little novel about a rural boy in Thai literature is called Luke Isan. We'll see if I can get a hold of that one. Might give you a little talk on that one as well. Thank you for indulging me. Sawadee Krap.